So my name is Yapur. I am an EPP MSI alumni, and I realize that I've been a little bit emotional because I'm an extemporaneous stalker, and realizing that 20 years ago I was here at Vandy at my first NOAA EPP meeting makes me think, wow, how lucky have I been? And that I'm getting all this money. So I took the liberty to make this presentation a little bit different because I have a message to you. So if I can use this announcement, I have one slide that I created for yeah, that's it. Well, anyway, this is me right here at the bottom of the pyramid, the food chain, graduating in La Paz, Bolivia, where I come from, with a degree in biology. And, you know, as life will have it, I moved to the United States in 1996, pursuing education and other opportunities that my country was not able to give me. So what happened once I moved to the United States? I went to the City College of New York. And at the City College of New York, they just started this program called Educational Partnership with Minority Serving Institutions. And I put this picture there on purpose because you have to notice that I had no clue what was going on. I love science, I love biology, and I had the plan to go to college for ecology, evolution, systematics, and those things. But I think history will be written in a different way. I was lucky enough to get the undergraduate scholarship of EPP and go and have two internships, one in Silver Spring, one in Boulder, Colorado, where I learned about remote sensing, which in turn made me change the field that I wanted to pursue as a career. So I learned for atmospheric sciences, which is when I graduated from City College. And I also started the graduate version of the EPP program. At the time, the graduate program would give you a job. So that was the time in which I finished my studies at City College, and I moved to Silver Spring. I started 3 years later, trying to understand what my way was in the federal government and how things happen. I volunteered to go to this NOAA's Program Coordination Office, which is a liaison of the line office where you work within NOAA to the office of the administrator. At the time, Admiral Marker. So with 3 years under my belt, I volunteered to go to something that was going to completely change my path. Love the science still, but the policy and some people use this term, sausage making in DC happens at that office. And it suddenly became attractive to me. So what happened next? All right, I had to make a decision. Do I stay with science or do I go towards policy? And I took this American Meteorological Society class called the Washington Forum. Once you start your careers and you start developing new skills, I encourage you to look for opportunities, because not only it opens the perspective of what you want to do with your life and what you want to do in your career, but it really gives you the opportunity to deal with mentors and do some mentoring that will completely change how you have been doing things so far. So that's AMS build, and then back to NOAA, the opportunity of doing leadership training. At this point, I'm fully convinced that I'm not going to be a hardcore scientist, but I'm going to be a policymaker that's going to use science to make decisions. So leadership competencies development program, NOAA, phenomenal. Finally, and why am I here and why am I going to give this talk? Is because I am working right now on a detail at the office of the Executive Office of the President, Office of Science, Technology, and Policy. Not only using all the science that I have learned and acquired over 20 years, the policy tricks, nooks, and crannies, but also the facilitation of senior leadership across the federal government. And that's why I'm going to talk to you about something called ICAMS. But before that, I'm still focusing on what's important to me. And that is my family. 4 kids and a wife. You don't have to have 4 kids to be happy. Maybe just okay. Has anybody ever heard about ICAMS? Okay, great. ICAMS is the Interagency Council for Advancing Meteorological Services. The federal government over the last 50 to 60 years has been coordinating meteorological science, research, and operations in a centralized office in NOAA. It's called the Office of the Federal Coordinator for Meteorology. But they realized that just doing the meteorology is not going to cut it. If you ever heard one of the NOAA assistant administrators, Craig McLean, saying, if you look at your 5 weather forecast and an ocean over. And so that is one of the premises that scientists across the federal government used to say, you know what, this needs to be an Earth system approach and not just meteorology only. So ICAMS was formed. Folks that gathered together during the previous administration, Kelvin Druckenmiller, head of OSTP, called all the scientists from academia, from government, and from the private sector and said, we have to do something with the federal coordination. How can we make it more effective, more efficient? And so the Weather Act was formed. Weather Act, which Congress says, now you will do this when it comes to meteorological organization and meteorological enterprise. And why is it needed? Because the old approach was that old and it was not effective enough. That's why we need now oceanographers, geologists, social scientists, you need. So I want to show you this famous or infamous chart that NOAA tracks. It's the $1 billion disaster. What happens with this chart is a way to depict how climate change, natural phenomena, or anything related to the Earth, planet eventually affects the economy. And over the last 20 years, NOAA has been doing this in a different way because it attempts to show budgeteers across the government that if you don't pay enough attention or if you don't anticipate or prepare for what's coming next, it's not going to go that well. For instance, let's talk about wildfires, which is one of the mandates that ICAMS has heard. Prior to 2000, there were 4 significant events in which the damage by a forest fire or wildfire was over $1 billion. But in the last 10 years, we had 15 of those at a very serious cost, the red line here, the combined disaster cost. And not only that, but other disasters that have to be taken into account. Unfortunately, for our business, the bigger the damage, the better the attention of the taxpayers. And that's how ICAMS is attempting to approach this. So this is a chart that really don't care, but I want to show you that that used to be the old way in which the government coordinated federal services for meteorology. The new way, which is part of this conversation, because it's important to know that ICAMS has 2 co-chairs. One that comes from the office of the president, typically the director of the OSTP, Science, Technology, and Policy, and the NOAA administrator. Now, you know that the Biden administration has elevated the role of OSTP into a cabinet. So this is very serious. A lot of money gets via this way. A lot of attention gets paid to the significant disasters, but also how we are coordinating this effectively. Yeah. Now, ICAMS has decided to, instead of having one big, humongous organization that talks about meteorology, we decided to have committees, Committee on Observational Systems, Cyber Facilities and Infrastructure, Services, which is essentially what OSTP used to be, and Research and Innovation. If you were at Jamiz's talk this morning, you probably heard the value of what is research to operations, to services, to decision, and that's part of the principle here. Now, this is a more detailed description of the structure of ICAMS. It's important to acknowledge that there are 46 independent bodies that make ICAMS. Working groups, subcommittees, implementation teams, joint action groups for those topics that go across the board. What is important to note here is that for the first time, the federal government is talking about, within the context of the Earth system approach, it's talking about the data management, the facilities, and all the resources that support and enable meteorology as a whole. Also very important to notice is that we're talking about a working group of environmental services supporting social equity, which is one of the areas in which we are starting to understand and learn why people die during tornadoes or hurricanes, since we have all this technology and all these communications sources that let them know in advance that we have as an independent time. So very excited to know that we are trying to address this. Now, this is not a solid structure. It will change and evolve with time, but it's important to know that we're trying to address every single aspect of why meteorologists need to work with other physical scientists. It's important to mention too that 15 agencies within the federal government are working on this, investing on this. Notably, the organization of ICAMS is the Department of Homeland Security and Human Health and Human Services. So this is a chart that attempts to summarize what leadership priorities are. These guys want us to make a more inclusive and dynamic way to interact with the private sector and with academia. We need to advance meteorological services to support particularly fire preparedness. Fire weather or wildfires is a buzzword right now. And a lot of money is coming from that. And I will actually explain one case that very well exemplifies how ICAMS is coordinating all these activities. Now, there's the priorities from the co-chairs of the organization and who is leading those activities within the 4 committees, as well as the Office of OSCP and INCO, which is the office that I have the pleasure to be leading right now. But not only the mandates are important within the ICAMS context. Let's not forget that members of the ICAMS community are very senior people within agencies that have a lot of influence with decision making. And so why is that important? Because they can also talk about what matters to them within their agencies or within the context of the Earth system approach. And you will see a bunch of topics that are very important for them, like disseminating and archiving data and models, better access, Earth system predictability, potentials and limitations, products risk management. So there's a myriad of topics that we get to discuss on a monthly basis. And believe me, working with very busy people, senior executives, budgeteers, and decision makers is not easy. And that's why back in the time in which I took that seminar with Yapur at AMS, then you think, do I want to deal with that? What is in it for me at the end of the day? Why don't I stick just with the science? Well, obviously I'm addicted to this because I love that crap. So ICAMS principles. ICAMS is trying to engage with young professionals by showing that no matter what field within the physical sciences you're trying to pursue, you will have to understand the value of what you know, the value of how you apply that, and the value of how you communicate. So very important. ICAMS, last week, on Friday of last week, we had our first dedicated workshop in which we convened a forum for all the scientists that are right now, scientists and decision makers that are working on wildfire. And it was a fascinating experience because for the first time, I saw that the work that I put over the last year at forming these groups, getting central repositories where you can concentrate the data or where you can centralize the information, is starting to pay dividends. And that is, let's say, NASA coming and saying, hey, wildfire, we have these models, we have these data sources, we have these observing systems, we have these experts working on that, and giving all what they need in order to make a very compelling case on further recommendations, not only for the federal government, but something that's going to influence policy for the private sector as well as our community. And in the same way, the Department of Energy said, like, yeah, talking about wildfire, we have these facilities that are working right now, we have these networks that provide data, we have field studies going on, and this is the way that we can contribute towards delineating new policy that will enable us to do a better, more efficient job at addressing fire. Same thing, the National Science Foundation came like, yeah, we've been working on this too, but it's been like the before the fire, during the fire, after the fire, and how can we actually better support, or actually, since we give a bunch of grants to different institutions, how can you tell us when should we give this grant in order to mitigate and minimize the effects of this problem? Same thing for the U.S. Geological Survey. So like, well, we have already worked on this too. We have a plan. Let me share our goals. Here's goal 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and the priorities in which we're working. If we coordinate this via the ICAMS mechanism, we can probably attain better results. NOAA comes and like, yeah, you're right. We have satellites, we're improving the products that we are developing. In fact, we're creating new ones, so you guys in the field can use these in a better way as well. So, in synthesis, a bunch of people got together, they realized the importance of addressing all the environmental problems that we have, not only in the United States, but in the world. And better facilitating, better engagement, and better use of knowledge is what ICAMS is all about. As a matter of fact, I created this analogy that I tried to convey to you in my first slide. You're a young student, young scientist. You only have 40 or 45 years ahead of you until you develop a wonderful path. How are you going to use that information? How are you going to apply it? And for that, know your science. Figure out how you're going to use it. Choose the field that you want to pursue. Research, academia, private sector. You want to make more money. Do not care about money, the recognition. What is it for you? So I have a charge, and it's for you to think as well. I have been very passionate about all the toys, all the possibilities that NOAA has afforded me to do by understanding the different observing systems that can address different problems. And how did I do that? By fully understanding that my science, what I know, what I'm passionate about, how can I use it, and how am I going to communicate? So I hope this was somewhat informational to you, because we don't speak at these seminars at all about what the government is doing to better the services that you actually use without knowing that. Most of the time come from the government. So with that, there's some links here that can provide more information specifically to ICAMS. And of course, feel free to stop me or send me a note or text if you need any more information about what I just talked, but most importantly, about opportunities to either come and work for NOAA or recommendations for where you should head next now that you're about to become a professional. Thank you so much. I apologize for the glitch at the beginning, but it was good.